Hi!
Hello!
Hi, everybody. It's DnDTime Talks. Welcome to it. It's the show where we discuss all things Dungeons & Dragons. I'm Pete.
And I'm Reef Shark. Jeremy. Pete, how are you?
You didn't go with the crab, Jeremy?
Oh, shit. Forgot about No, I didn't go with the crab.
Today's topic, we'll be talking exclusively about crabs. Small crabs, giant crabs. Maybe even, what was the one that we were saying? Cthulhu? Is that what they're called?
No, we're not. Pete, you were saying, you son of a bitch. We're not talking about Chul.
Chul, thank you, Chul. I lost the name. Hi, everybody. It's good to see y'all hanging out, and I'm excited to talk about some underwater monsters today. Yeah. Before that, Jeremy, how are you? Just how are you doing in general?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you, Pete?
I'm feeling pretty good. I got my wow, I thought I had more water than I do. I hope that this water gets me through this particular. I guess there's going to be a lot of water in the content, so. Yep. That wasn't like a setup for the joke. I just.
Anywho, y'all. Hello, chat. Hello, I see Bionic Sheba hanging out. Max Mikester. I saw that Wild Ricochet was out there, and I'm sure there are more of you lurking in the shadows. But yeah, this is DnDTime Talks, the show where we talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons. And as we have not subtly, even a little bit alluded to, we're going to be talking about underwater stuff as a continuation of our series on underwater and nautical adventuring. We're going to be talking specifically today about underwater monsters or sea monsters. We're not just going like the big monsters, so we're going to talk about all sorts of threats that you might find in a Dungeons and Dragons fantasy, adventure game underwater. So
or even just non-threats. I think we have a couple of like NPC type characters that we wanted to talk about too, or creatures.
Absolutely, it's creatures you'll see under the sea,
beneath the waves. And if you have any thoughts or any comments or questions or just anything you want to say, make sure you speak up in chat. And additionally, at the end of the stream, as always, we will be doing our Ask Pete and Jeremy segment. So if you have any questions for me and Jeremy that are unrelated to our topic or just unrelated to even D&D, whatever you want to ask us, if you go on our Discord, it is linked there, and you can ask us some random questions. We've gotten some really goofy ones, some really good ones in the past. So be sure to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just dive right in. Underwater monsters. So these are creatures that provide threats to the players in nautical adventures. Specifically, we're going to focus more on underwater. We'll touch on some of the other, maybe not underwater threats at the end just a little bit. But yeah, these are anything that could threaten the creature's progress on any sort of nautical adventure. Oftentimes, these are going to be nefarious, evil creatures, as a lot of the time your enemies are in D&D. But there are some just normal-ass creatures. This is just a creature that lives in the water, our first example, like sharks. And again, this is going to be focused much more toward your dungeon masters than maybe your players. But it's always good for a player to have some idea of what's going on.
Hello, Blood Deuce. Did you see Blood Deuce popped in? So let's talk sharks in that case, Jeremy.
Yeah.
For anyone who's unfamiliar with sharks, we're talking about just sharks, just regular old sharks, and I think that's going to bring us into kind of also just one major category of type of creature that you can meet in the ocean, because there's a lot of monsters that are great enemies that you can throw at people that are just the types of animals that you would actually meet. The ocean has some very real, terrifying things. And I think shark is one of the quintessential of those.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead. I was saying, tying into kind of what we were talking about last week, the ocean can be a very alien place, and that's part of the appeal of it. But part of the appeal of any adventure is finding something that you understand, that you recognize, right? That you can understand, that you get what it is. And a shark is that kind of enemy. Every player who you see a dorsal fin sticking out of the water, every player is going to say, "Oh shit, I know what that is, shark."
Oh yeah, it's iconic. They'll probably begin to hear the Jaws, dum bum 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 bum, the music in their head as they see the shark, and they know what they're kind of getting into. Additionally, those kind of tropes, and I think we've talked about, leaning into players' expectations when you're on the ocean, and then finding ways to subvert them, using that fin trope as a way, something sticking out of the water and growing close, and then kind of switching it up on them would be a kind of a great trick to do as a DM. Have it not be the exact thing that it expected. It might be some maybe merfolk like creature that has kind of a fin dorsal. I think we're going to talk about them a little bit alongside of sharks as well. Some of the classics of those. But for starters, I want to talk about just like the baseline shark that appears. Which shark would you call the quintessential shark in 5e?
Yeah. So there are three sharks in the monster manual by default. There are three different sharks to choose from. There is the giant shark, there is the hunter shark, and there is the reef shark. The reef shark being the simplest. It's challenge rating 1/4. It is the most standard kind of one of those creatures that you could throw at a player, and it's kind of what they expect, right? It is a medium creature, so it's about the size of a human, kind of what you expect in a shark. It's based on the actual reef shark, which exists in real life, and like that, it has some abilities that kind of reference that. It has pack tactics, so it likes to kind of swarm. Oftentimes, if you use a reef shark, you can use a bunch of them. But the other two sharks are a little different. They have the more bloodthirsty kind of great white aesthetic to them, like the hunter shark. And both the hunter shark and the giant shark will both have that same shtick where they really become more powerful when they sense blood. So they have advantage on attacks against creatures that have taken any damage, which can make them really serious threats and really feel like, oh shit, there's blood in the water. It adds a cool nuance and tactic to the game, especially when the players understand what's going on.
And there's an inherent kind of standard there, understanding there from your players when the blood hits the water. The mechanics will make sense. Like, why do they have advantage? Oh, because they're in a feeding frenzy, because that's what sharks do. That kind of mechanic, I think, kudos to Wizards for starters. It's just good game design that the mechanics kind of feel like what the creature is, but also using these kind of standard monsters is a great way to like make your players. I feel like that kind of monster really creates immersion, so use that tactic. I think a really interesting way to introduce a shark would be less to kind of just have them have a random encounter when some sharks show up, but rather to wait for a situation where somebody's in the water and bleeding, and have that rather draw the sharks to the situation. So maybe there weren't sharks involved at all, but now that this iconic thing has happened, they're bleeding in the ocean. The sharks begin to kind of show up and add extra danger and tension into the situation in a very believable way.
Yeah, and Pete, it looks like your video crapped out.
Oh, no.
Might want to just, I don't know, turn it on and off in the Skype, and hopefully it gets going again. Classic Skype right there. But yeah, like Pete was saying, having that moment where the sharks come in because of the blood kind of appearing in the water, that is a really cool nuance to like building tension as dungeon mastering. So let's say the players are, they find like, oh my God. Oh, Pete, what the hell, dude? Just turn your video on and off.
Oh, that's what I did.
No, you closed the Skype call. Oh my ears. All right, sorry about that, guys. Pete just deafened me.
My computer's like completely freaking out now that this happened.
All right, well, Pete doesn't have any video now.
All right, well, sick.
All right, well, Pete, you belong to Skype.
Yep, God. Apparently.
Well, anyway, moving along. Part of that is like, if the players are exploring, let's say they've cast a spell of water breathing upon themselves, and they're deep beneath the waves, right? And they're looking for whatever have you, some treasure perhaps. I love the idea of a dungeon master asking them, oh yeah, as you go to start crawling through the wreckage, pulling yourself through into the hull of the sunken ship, can you roll me a dexterity saving throw? And the players are like, oh shit. And they roll and they do poorly, and all right. And all you say is, all right, yeah, you take a scratch and you take 1 point of damage. And the players always kind of look at each other. That's it? That was the trap is 1 point of damage? And then you describe, right, how, and your blood slowly begins to diffuse in the water around you. A single drop spreading out. in the open ocean. And then, right, that leads to the sharks. You begin to see dark shapes shifting around in the shadows. And so that kind of thing, man, it looks like we've totally lost Pete's video. But that kind of thing is the kind of deal, right, that can be engaging, exciting, and dramatic for players. So make sure that, like, that's a really important thing to utilize when you're running these kinds of enemies.
Absolutely, that's a really cool visual idea there. The kind of the blood in the water. You know, you think of I think one of the iconic scenes there would be Finding Nemo, the scene where I believe it's Marlin gets a little bit of a loose cut, and they show Bruce kind of breathe in the blood that's floating up through. I knew exactly the kind of mental image, and I think that'll resonate with a lot of players too.
Absolutely.
Would you like to start talking about one of our first monsters, Jeremy?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, the sharks tie in really well with this, because sharks aren't the only creature in the ocean that really benefits, right, that has this blood frenzy. Another creature that does is one of the classic monsters, the Sahuagin, or Sahagin, depending on who you pronounce it. God, I even know some people who pronounce it Sahagwin, but that's nowhere near correct.
The first time I read it, I thought Sawagin made the most sense by far, just looking at it. But
I've heard Sahagin very often, but they're Sahuagin. They're basically shark merfolk. So think of your classic, we live in the water and we're mer people. Except they're part shark. They have this blood frenzy. They have their gills. They often wear spiky, shelled armor and have vicious weaponry. They're an intelligent people or foe to be fighting against and to run into. And like the shark, they have this blood frenzy. They get advantage on their attack rolls against creatures that don't have all of their hit points. And that's a really big deal, because, I mean, that's just really cool. Also, they have a feature called shark telepathy, which allows them to communicate telepathically with sharks. So oftentimes, Sahuagin and sharks are creatures you'll use in tandem. You'll use a Sahuagin with a few hunter sharks, and they'll be like a scout party. Or perhaps they'll be riding the sharks, or commanding them, or what have you. But oftentimes, they're a really convenient way where if you've thrown too many sharks at enemy, well, why don't the sharks just kill all the players? Well, maybe the Sahuagin want to capture. And yeah.
I think I'm back on, Jeremy. I don't know if there's like a button you can put to.
I'm gonna see, Pete, if we can get you back. I'm not seeing you, man.
I'm up. My camera's.
We're gonna try that one more time and see if you come back. Hopefully.
I was just up on my screen. All
right, you're up now. Pete has returned.
Hey, I'm so glad to be back, everyone. It's good to see you again. You all look lovely. It's wonderful to be here. Sahuagin starts getting into, again, beyond just the combat challenges and the way that they work with the sharks, and there's a lot of cool things that you can do there. Just a dynamic of the, kind of master and their hounds, which I think the Sahuagin and sharks have. Which feels cool and iconic, and it's the ocean variant of that. You're also moving now into the category of sentient creatures. The Sahuagins have culture, they have goals, they have their own desires. And while they are, I believe in the lore, they are just inherently completely evil, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, they are objectively evil.
Yeah,
they specifically lawful evil. They're the worst kind of evil.
Yep, they're just bad people, those Sahuagin.
They're Sahuagin.
Yeah, the bad humanoids. There we go. Yeah. I think Sahuagin are people. I think Sahuagin are people too. I think only humans are not people.
Because the thing about Sahuagin and sharks that are great is, especially for fledgling dungeon masters, or even just dungeon masters that really don't have a ton of experience running underwater adventures, which, let's be real, no one does. The vast majority of adventures are not run at sea or in a nautical environment.
Yep.
They work really well because Sahuagin are intelligent and they have a society just like creatures on land, just like bandits. They're kind of like sea bandits, but you can treat them a little more monstrous because they're part shark. They have a hierarchy in their leadership. There's the Sahuagin, the kind of baseline CR 1/2 monster, kind of the analog to the reef shark. There's the Sahuagin Priestess, which is a kind of more powerful variant of Sahuagin, more hit points. It can cast some spells, basically. And otherwise, it can still do its melee attacks, as all the Sahuagin can. And that's CR2, which is, oh, wow, it's exactly the same as the Hunter Shark. And then you go up to CR5 with the Sahuagin Baron. And when you compare that to the Giant Shark, also CR5. And the Sahuagin Baron just has more hit points and does more attacks. They're very simple to run. They're very straightforward to run. You look at their stat blocks and it just kind of makes sense. And they really fit a nice level progression underwater, as these are your very common, relatively common, right, early game nemesis underwater.
Oh yeah,
that your players might get used to and get used to fighting.
And I can imagine if you're doing something akin to an adventure, or anything that's longer than a random encounter that are involving the Sahuagins, using that Sahuagin Priestess and using that Sahuagin Baron could be a really good way of, like, a Sahuagin Priestess feels like a Legion commander, like a small time boss of a group of Sahuagin. Sahuagin Baron could very reasonably be your this is the Sahuagin king that has been leading all of the raiding parties on the local villages. It has that definite vibe to it, and the mechanics of them aren't necessarily all that complicated. Like Jeremy was saying, Sahuagin Priestess is a Sahuagin that casts spells. Sahuagin Baron is a more attacks Sahuagin. You can do a lot with the baseline Sahuagin stat block and just kind of take in other creatures and other humanoids and abilities that you want. For example, maybe there's specific spells that you think it would be cool for the Sahuagin to have. You can just change those spells, and it's not going to have, as long as you're keeping the spell levels similar, it's not going to have too big of an impact on the challenge rating and the difficulty of it. Depending totally obviously agree. Depending on the spells. Likewise, you can look at some other creatures. Say you want a Sahuagin that feels a little bit more thiefy and a little bit more roguelike. You can have, like, you could very easily make a Sahuagin thief by giving them proficiency in the stealth skill, while keeping all of the other things that define a Sahuagin. A swim speed, the ability to breathe underwater, the blood frenzy. You can do a lot with the baseline stat block to really start to vary them up and make them interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, they make great enemies in that regard. Appendix B of the Monster Manual, it's just the very end. And I know Volo's Guide to Monsters also has an appendix like this in the back. It just has a bunch of humanoid examples. It has mage, it has thief, it has druid. And they're just example, relatively low to middle level challenge rating humanoids. They can cast spells, they can make attacks and have special abilities. They have sneak attack and can sneak around like a thief. You can easily transform any of those into a Sahuagin just by saying they have blood frenzy, they can talk to sharks, and they can swim underwater and breathe underwater. And you're done. Usually, you probably, if they're a martial character, it's going to be like one challenge rating higher, give or take, because of the blood frenzy.
The blood frenzy
is powerful.
Very significant. Yep.
But besides that, it's going to be pretty comparable. You're not going to break things too often by doing that.
Yep.
And it's going to be fun. True. It's going to be interesting to see a variety of enemies, especially if you do choose to make Sahuagin kind of the prime threat in whatever you're doing.
And what Jeremy was just saying, this idea, it immediately sparked creativity when he said Sahuagin Druid. Like a Sahuagin Druid who's like turning into like sharks and hunting with the pack. I can imagine taking down one shark, and all of a sudden it's just, I was a druid! And it just a Sahuagin pops out, if they understand that mechanic. And I'm sure there's other really interesting things you could do with that too. So it's really easy to be inspired if you use those kind of tools.
Absolutely. Well, now we've talked a lot about this sentient enemy, right? That can hunt you under the water and provide a real nemesis. But we haven't really talked about friendly faces you might see under the water, because there are other humanoids that we mentioned earlier, like merfolk, that would provide, could be friends. They also could be enemies. There's nothing to say that all merfolk are friendly. If you look at merfolk in the Monster Manual, they show up as neutral and fairly low challenge rating. Yeah. But, you can make them enemies, you can make them friends, you can make them whatever you'd like. And their basic abilities are pretty straightforward. They can swim. That's it. Oh, and they can breathe underwater. So like the Thuigan, you can take any of the stats in the back of the book, give it a swim speed and the ability to breathe underwater, and call it a merfolk. And there's really nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really love merfolk personally.
Yeah, there's something that is very... I think any party is going to be really excited about merfolk for a lot of reasons, but for starters, it's just the iconicism of you want to meet a mermaid, you want to meet a merman when you're on your adventures at sea. And there's also the allure, because I think something more than the Sahuagin are sentient and they have something of a society, but when you meet a merfolk, there's an implication that the merfolk society is one that you might actually be able to interact with. You might be able to go down to an underwater city like Atlantis, or some equivalent therein, and, deal with these creatures, interact with them, learn from them.
Yeah, and one of the things I really love about that, right, is early in the adventure, let's say you're starting at level 1 or even like level 2 or 3 in this nautical campaign that you're playing or you're running. One of the things I love about merfolk is you can introduce them really early, just like Sahuagin, because Sahuagin have arms and legs and can go on land. Merfolk can be anywhere, right? They can help you if your ship is being boarded by Sahuagin. They can be there throughout the adventure. And I love the idea of the characters early in the campaign meeting the merfolk, even being friendly with the merfolk and knowing of that civilization, but just not being able to go down there because they can't breathe underwater. And that kind of point later on when they get to 5th level and they can cast that 3rd level spell, water breathing, and then they can go down and begin to explore that merfolk city and civilization and trade the treasures they found and all that. That's just awesome, right? It feels like you play a video game and there are these invisible walls.
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks because you want to go there and you can't because of there's just no real reason. There's just a wall.
You don't have the boots of being underwater.
Yeah, well, and this works like that, right? Except it makes sense. It's not an invisible wall that you don't understand. It's, I can't breathe underwater. I'm a human. So it works in that the same kind of cool, wait, we want to go back to where those merfolk were because when we talked to them, they told us about some really cool thing, but we just couldn't go under there at the time, right? It's a really cool way to have areas be worth returning to, because I see even in a lot of really great D&D games that there are locations the players go to, they complete the location and they never go back. Right? They kill all the monsters there and they leave. The merfolk, especially introducing them when players can't go to the bottom, are a really cool way to like
I really like that.
Give areas more life.
I definitely really like that. Inspires players to want to adventure more. Which is one of the healthiest things you can do as a dungeon master. It's one of the best things you can do for your game. Now, Jeremy, there was something that we were talking about that I know that you really love about merfolk also, and this is just a thing in the lore of merfolk, and that's just kind of known in D&D, but they do ride giant seahorses.
That they do. So you are all probably aware seahorses are like this big, maybe at biggest. Oh, sorry, this big. Merfolk tend to ride horse-sized seahorses, and it's just great. There's nothing particularly special about them. I mean, they have pretty much the same abilities horses do, except they can swim and breathe underwater. You're seeing this.
It's the horse. It's the horse of the sea.
It's actually not even any faster than a merfolk. But the point is, it's neat. It's cool. It feels like, wow, this is a crazy new place. Whoa, there are people riding giant seahorse. And it's great. It's just really cool. I do not know a party that if they were going to spend a lot of time underwater would not be like, hey, how do we get giant seahorse? Can we train them to follow our boat? Like, I want giant seahorse. Because it just sounds amazing to me.
I 100% agree. I certainly have not met the player. I know that I'm not the exception. It doesn't matter. Like, I know that right now, and Jeremy has just said this. It doesn't change that if, like, Jeremy was running a game for me and I went into a city, it wouldn't change that I want that giant seahorse. I think that's an absolute.
Yeah, and a couple quick comments. Bionic Shiba in chat was saying, don't forget the sea elves. Yeah, sea elves are another awesome kind of way to tie in. that kind of friendly or maybe neutral or even evil, right? Antagonistic underwater society. And it works in a very similar way to merfolk. Triton are another one, which are pretty much merfolk, but they have legs instead of tails. So yeah, I mean, you can play it a whole ton of different ways. In the Forgotten Realms, there's the Sea of Fallen Stars, an inland sea where there's just tons of sea elves. And yeah, I mean, you can play it anywhere, in any campaign, in any setting, you can just use them. It really doesn't matter for the most part.
Agreed.
Sorry, go here. Under the sea, all the things try to eat me. Poor sword.
Do you want to start talking about some of the scarier guys that you find underwater?
I think so, but first I just want to say, Freynour, thank you for 15 months. That's a long time.
15 months? Thank you so much.
I would read your comment, but I don't know. That'd be pretty rude.
It'd
be pretty rude of me to swear on my stream. I've never done this before.
Freynour says, "Oh, what the F?"
And Shiva, I love the idea of giant seahorse chariots. Excellent. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, that's a way to, like, this is your classic sunken Grecian, like, yeah.
That's excellent. Definitely the tone for sure is Grecian.
Exactly. Shields made of shells. Beautiful.
So, Jeremy, what if a merfolk were to get very angry and mean?
I think you'd have to get more than angry, but I think it would have to be fundamentally changed to become a real
at the core of their being, perhaps by a demon?
Oh my gosh, Pete, would such a thing actually exist?
They do exist, Jeremy, and they're called the Marrow, and they're evil, mean merfolk called the Marrow. And they're kind of like Sahuagin, in a sense. But the difference between the Sahuagin and the Marrow is, for Sahuagin, you got like the civilization of Sahuagin. Marrow, these are just savage beasts. They are, sentient, but just chaotic, going around and just destroying anything that they can, eating what they can, pulling people into the sea, drowning them and consuming them. I believe for Demogorgon.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things. Traditionally, they do tie into the Demon Lords and Demogorgon, but you could always just use Marrow as a generic, a horrible, twisted monster version of merfolk. It can be for really anything you like. And they, like a lot of the creatures we've run into so far, are pretty straightforward. They can breathe underwater. They have a swim speed. But beyond that, they have a special ability that is what makes them unique.
Yep.
They have a harpoon. Now, everyone, I think, thinks of harpoons when they're talking about underwater combat, right? Everyone thinks that, makes that connection.
Oh, yeah.
I know I do. What the Marrow do is they whip their harpoon, and when they spear something, they can pull it toward them. They're kind of like a roper, but a little less alien, if you're familiar with that one.
Damagey roper.
Yeah. And they are terrifying, and they're cool for a reason that's different from the Sahuagin or Sea Elves or Merfolk, because there's a tactic to how you want to play Marrow.
Yep.
The other creatures, they function like bandits or spellcasters or anything like that. We mentioned the Appendix B of the Monster Manual, where there's all those different humanoids. Well, Marrow don't do that. Because they're really identified by that harpoon, you want to use these characters in underwater caves or shipwrecks, places where characters can get dragged away from their friends or into corners or places they can't escape very easily. You don't want to use Marrow, I feel, as much in the open water, unless you're doing it just to show new players that, or maybe not new players, but players inexperienced with underwater foes, that, yeah, these kinds of things can exist.
And I definitely think there's also an appeal to, a nice, bright, sunny day, the players leaning out the side of the ship, and then a harpoon just and pulls them into the ocean, and all of a sudden they're dragged under with a whole bunch of Marrow. That player probably dies in that scenario.
But maybe it's an NPC.
That would be... Oh, yeah, maybe it's an NPC. I see what you're saying. I thought you were saying that maybe the Marrow's an NPC that you have planned. I was like, that's a weird introduction to a character that you want to... That character's going to die soon when everyone wants to kill him. But aside the point, there's a lot of really interesting things you can do. It really ties into some of that horror of the ocean. The idea of being, any effect that drags something towards you, I think, has like an inherent terrifying nature to it. Like the Lonely has that kind of effect with its big arm. We talked about that before. The way it just kind of pulls you in towards it. All of those monsters, there's something, especially because it can target a type of character that usually doesn't get targeted. The caster or the archer being dragged right up to the front and center of these foes can be a really unique, the cleric, a really unique challenge for a character that's not usually on the front lines too. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff you can do with the Marrow.
And the thing I love about the Marrow is they're that sweet spot challenge rating. They're challenge rating 2, which means they're a really good singular threat for like a level 1 or 2 party. For a medium to actually be a hard encounter for a level 1 party. But they're a pretty good low-level threat if you use just one. But if you use like 5 or 6 of them, they're a pretty good threat for like a level 5 or 6 party. That's like a serious threat still. And I really like that aspect of them. They're just cool and they're dramatic and it's just one feature that you really have to think about and just try to use them in environments which benefit what they're doing. Or to spear people off the side of a ship when they're not expecting it, because that's also terrifying if the players can't swim and breathe in the water.
On the subject of, we were talking last week about how to make underwater combat more interesting and having like a tutorial on underwater combat. Marrow are a great way to introduce your players to the mechanics of fighting in the water. Jeremy,
absolutely.
What do you want to talk about next?
Well, I was just going to touch on very briefly, there are other enemies that also benefit really well from those kinds of environments. Like, let's say the players are exploring a shipwreck or a cave, underwater cave, super common, or a sunken temple or whatever. Those are like some of the standard places you would expect to go to as an adventurer going underwater. And giant octopus is actually scary. They're really neat. I really just wanted to mention them quickly, and I love them because of their ink cloud. They do exactly what you expect a giant octopus to do. They grapple you with their tentacles, split out their ink cloud, and then they just get that one person, right? Or they run away through some tiny little creaks and cracks. All of those cool little features can just make the giant octopus another really cool threat in those tight spaces that you can run into. But Pete, there's one enemy in particular that I know you really love that you can really use anywhere, although it's a little more often thought of inland or in cleaner waters. Yes. And that is the Quipper.
The Quipper is a piranha, essentially. That's what a Quipper is. It's a piranha. That don't mean we're talking kind of seafaring and water games. So these make great enemies if it's more of an inland, water or lake situation. I see Sheba there, Quippers. Yep, you know the pain. But a Quipper on its own is not all that terrifying of a threat.
Not at all. It's weak, actually. It's really weak.
Yes. What you need to fear is the swarm of Quippers. Absolutely. Which is when you take a whole bunch of Quippers and you put them in a pile. It is a monster in the original monster manual. There's a whole bunch of swarms in there. Appendix A. Get swarms of rats and swarms of bugs. We're going to be talking about basically a swarm of piranhas right now. Some of the things about swarms that you'll keep in mind is they're a lot harder to lock down than a lot of enemies. Crowd control doesn't really work on them because you can only target one thing with most of those spells. So they're immune to things like any charms or fear effects. So when you encounter a swarm, you're going to fight that swarm. You don't have much other alternative other than to run away. Our Quipper swarm's also going to have that blood frenzy, which means they're also, just like the sharks, are going to have advantage on any attacks after they get their first hit. And frankly, they just hit very hard.
If you're not familiar with Quippers, with Quipper Swarm specifically, they're only challenge rating 1, but they're a very, very, very powerful challenge rating 1 monster. They take half damage from all physical attacks, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, because they're a swarm. And with that blood frenzy, and they do extra damage when they're all together, right? When they're at more than half their total hit points, they become weaker halfway through the fight. So if the players can do a lot of damage to them early, it's nice. But oftentimes, if the swarm strikes first, quippers can be lethal. And more than sharks, this is the reason your players are afraid of the water. They're afraid of quippers. They're tiny little fish.
Yeah, sharks are what the player who's never played D&D is afraid of in the ocean. Quippers are the thing that your veteran D&D player is going to go, oh, not the quipper swarm. It's just terrifying. As a DM also, I can definitely imagine a lot of, great description of the way the fish kind of swarm up around you, where they kind of bite onto you. You have them on your arms and your legs and, the back of your neck, you feel one kind of bite in. Depending on how detailed you want to go in your descriptions, I think the quipper swarm can be terrifying more than just mechanically as well.
I totally agree. One of the things about the quipper swarm, and this is very much a tangent, we've been talking a lot about monsters, but there's a very special magic item in the Dungeon Master's Guide called the Trident of Fish command, which players always laugh at. I've seen players, I've been in parties where someone has gotten the Trident of Fish command, they're like, oh, it's the Trident of Fish command, this thing sucks. Dude, if you let that Trident of Fish command get them some quippers, that player's going to love the Trident of Fish command. Just a note. It's a great way to, if the party especially gets a hatred for quippers, let them turn it on its head later on. Give them a magic item like the Trident of Fish command, which lets them control fish, and let them now control the quipper, and they'll feel really happy that we got murdered by these quippers earlier, but now we rule the quippers.
And you can kind of flavor that, because the Trident of Fish command, technically, because the quippers can't be charmed. As a DM, if I did this, I would probably just be like, yeah, it works on the quipper swarm. You just you command the quippers. Or you just make one quipper friend.
Just a single quipper. Just do one over and over, and then you have a swarm.
A betrayer, a single betrayer quipper. Jeremy, what do you want to talk about next? Let's talk about another guy.
So there's this next kind of category is open water threats. Now, everything we've talked about so far, Marrow, you can use Marrow in open water, but they're not really especially suited for it. You can use Sahuagin, and it's fine with their sharks. Well, this is a creature that really needs open water because it is literally huge, and it is the killer whale.
Yes.
Another classic, you know this is a real-life monster, or creature, rather. Probably don't think of it as a monster, but you will when it's trying to rip you apart. Killer whales are challenge rating 3, so again, great mid-level threats for, middling level parties. And as you get to higher levels, a couple of killer whales or just a pod of killer whales is terrifying, and it makes sense no matter where you are in the ocean. And I mean, they're really simple. They don't have anything really special about them, except for their echolocation, which means at night in the water or in very murky water, they can still see perfectly fine. And a really cool way to make a fight with killer whales interesting is if it's in very, very murky waters. And if you do that, well, that's going to be dramatic because the killer whales can see the players, but the players can't see the killer whales very well. Maybe they have a limited visibility of 30 feet because of the murk.
Absolutely.
And it's just awesome.
In the same vein, I think a lot of your sharks have blind sight as well, which give them a similar kind of advantage in the water. There's a lot of things you can do in making. I think the one thing that underwater combat does best is making your players feel like they have a disadvantage in every fight that they're in, unless they have completely geared out for underwater combat, which is extremely rare to find. Which is, one of the things that makes it interesting for certain.
And that's one of the things about the killer whale. At CR3, it hits pretty hard, but it makes one attack per turn. It's not that lethal of a threat, but if the players feel like it's a lethal threat, that's what you want. You really want a combat encounter that feels super threatening, but isn't just a slaughter, right? You want to make everything feel dramatic and feel intense, but still the players have a good shot most of the time.
I think the killer whale is the first thing in our sea monster category too, because we're going to talk about some sea monsters, I think, a little bit later. But they're the first
Yeah, we're getting there.
basics. Yeah, they're the first basic sea monster. And there's a lot you can do in terms of tactics just by using their size and their ability to be underwater as well. Like if the players are out there in like a rowboat because they were just going out to like a little island that was not very far away, a killer whale just like being near the boat, there's a lot of like effects and like skill-based challenges that I would add to that stat block where it's less I would give the killer whale the ability to just crash into the boat and to use like its natural strength to try and just knock the boat over and put people into the water. Maybe not necessarily intentionally, but just in trying to ram it and get at the food. I think that's something, the killer whale is not intelligent, but I think it's something it would do instinctively. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can do there.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, like the same way, even if you didn't want to make it necessarily a skill-based skill challenge, which you absolutely could, just really aren't great rules for that in 5e currently. You could always just have it be the killer whale attacks your rowboat. Rowboats have an armor class and they have hit points in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And, a whale coming up and slamming into the boat and doing a ton of damage to it will horrify your players. They will immediately start trying to figure out, oh my God, he's going to tip us over. And even if you don't have any intention of ever tipping the rowboat over because you don't want to just kill your level 2 players,
yep,
maybe just imply that might happen if they aren't able to scare the whale away.
Or, I think in the same regard, the boat shakes, make a dexterity save. All right, one player ends up falling out and they have to help them back in. Maybe not all of them are out and the boat's not completely destroyed, but it does leave that threat into the battlefield for a little bit and kind of force them into a tenser situation.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like about killer whales as just creatures, they're just creatures. Especially if a party is in a rough spot, if you do enough damage to killer whale, it'll just swim. You could just have it swim away. Even if the party is on the brink of defeat, if a killer whale gets knocked to below half its hit points, there's no reason that you as a dungeon master can't just say, yeah, it swims away. It doesn't want to die because it's a creature. It doesn't comprehend that you're out of spell slots.
It's not a
whale.
It's not a intelligence or a marrow, yeah. The Sahuagin doesn't have anything to like report its failure if it comes back not having killed you.
Not driven by evil. It just wants to eat fish.
It's just hungry. I like Bionic Shivo's comment here. A killer whale grapples you with its mouth and swims down. That is all it does, which is a brutal and terrifying tactic. But I think it also brings us into like another category of enemy that we have at sea, which what I'm thinking of wasn't necessarily grapples you, brings you down, but that's a brutal tactic to use. I think the one that I like is it grapples you and flies you up. These are our kind of seafaring avian predators. Because what do you think of when you think of things that hunt fish? I always picture things like eagles coming down and grabbing fish out of the water. And there are definitely the equivalent of that for adventurers. One of the quintessential ones would be the harpy.
Yeah, I love harpies. If you're not familiar with them, they're basically half women, half eagle things. They got big feathery wings, hideous visages, and they are just monsters in their raw form. Absolutely monstrous. Oftentimes, they in 5th edition, they have their alluring song, kind of like a siren, which they can use to charm unsuspecting people like sailors. Mm-hmm. And all they want to do is take you off and then devour you. And they are horrifying. They're a terrifying threat.
There's definitely some cool, introducing the harpy things that you can do too with the luring song. The luring song is a little bit of a tricky feature to use. And I know me and you have talked about this before, Jeremy. I don't know if we've done it on stream, where players always kind of hear like, oh, you're out on the ocean and over coming from the rocks in the distance, you hear a beautiful and mysterious melody. And every player is just like, oh, never going to go over there. That's a scary harpy because they know, the trope of it.
Yep.
Have you ever used a luring song in a way that kind of really engaged your players?
Engaged my players?
It was interesting, I suppose.
Yeah, it's very hard to use it. I feel like a lot of players, and it depends on your group, right? a lot of players are kind of jaded by the adventuring life, and you'll get to the point where it's like, yes, you see a shipwreck on the rocks up ahead, and they'll be like, interesting. I avoid it because it's a trap. It's like, you see sailors drowning, and there's people dying on the rocks. It's like, yep, we don't go there. It's like, okay. And your elaborate plot line about the crashed prince from across the sea is gone to the waves because the players thought it was a trap. Or your elaborate trap that to lure the players in and attack them with harpies didn't quite plan out. A great way I like to use the alluring song is maybe treat it more like less mechanically. So don't treat it as something that maybe affects the players so easily, but affecting the crew of the ship. That might be something.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
If you're out on the ship and you hear the harpy song and the player's like, I plug my ears. And you go, all right, yeah, you all plug yours, no problem. You seem to have completely negated the thing, except you notice your ship is turned directly toward the rocks and everyone in the crew is going full tilt to getting the ship going faster. Oh, suddenly that is something that the players have to react to, right? It is now if we don't stop the song or snap the crew out of it, we're going to crash and then we're going to drown and the harpies will eat us anyway. So that's, I think, probably the best way to use that in this kind of circumstance, because it's not a powerful ability in its own right, normal. Harpies are also challenge rating 1. They're meant for low-level parties.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know if we got to it too much, the fly-away tactic is really fun on harpies.
Oh, yeah. They fly down, they grapple someone, and they try to fly away. But equally good at that, you think of the crag out on the poking out of the water with the harpy nest in it. Also great, wyverns. Wyverns work the same way at challenge rating 6. They're a much, much higher challenge rating, and they are horrifying to suddenly lay siege to your ship. And they can just swoop down, start stabbing people with their stingers, which are highly poisonous, or just grapple people and run. Creatures that are attacking your ship, unless they are humanoid creatures that want to sail on your ship, they don't care to hang around. They're there to do what they went there to do. Wyverns or harpies are there to grab someone to eat and leave. Usually. They don't want to sit on the deck of your ship and battle until everyone's dead. That does, a lot of dungeon masters run it that way, but a lot of the times it doesn't make sense for the creature. So, if you're gonna have a wyvern go down onto the deck, knock someone unconscious, grapple them, and fly away, describe how the wyvern's looking around like it's trying to find a way to get out with its prey. Right? Yeah. Forecast that, because it's gonna suck if the players are expecting a big battle and they're ready for their big battle, and the harpy just knocks someone unconscious and flies away, and they're like, shit.
I guess
thought there was going to be a fight, and we could have thrown nets on it or tried to grapple it, or
I guess Brian doesn't get to play the next session while we go and get him, while we go and rescue him.
Well, except with harpies and wyverns are probably dead.
Yeah, probably.
But maybe not, though. Maybe the harpies and the wyverns are controlled by an evil necromancer who lives upon the hollowed out cavern beneath the crag.
Are they undead harpies?
Sure, go for it, right?
Exactly, yeah. What Jerry just said, yeah, whatever, is a great mindset to have, honestly, as a DM. Just they're undead harpies, sure. I guess they'll be immune to poison. Want to move on to, because we're running out of time very quickly, Jeremy. I would like to definitely devote a good amount of time to the big boys.
Yeah, so there are, I think, 4 major big boys that we want to talk about. And I think one of them I'm going to very lightly touch on because it is a whole nother story. And that is the Storm Giant. Storm Giants are an enemy that you can find underwater. They are among the most powerful giants. Actually, I think they are the most powerful giants. Challenge rating 13, super powerful, all about big thunder guys. And lightning. They're terrifying.
Storm Giant crew on a ship that's sailing at sea on a very big ship sounds really cool to me.
Oh yeah, or a storm giant attacking your ship, or summoning a terrible storm above you, or hell, trying to quell the storm around you. I've actually seen that happen once, where Storm Giant was trying to save a ship that was being lost to a storm, and the party counterspelled the Storm Giant's control weather as it was trying to stop the storm, thinking it was a threat, and then their ship crashed. They can be incredible friends or foes.
It sounds like a great moment when they eventually talked to that Storm Giant and found out about it, though.
Pretty funny.
But V-Bunny, I think V-Bunny's got the right idea here. He's saying in chat right there, giant octopuses, krakens, giant turtles, exactly. Those are the big guys that you're going to count in the ocean. Well, let's talk about Dragon Turtle very quickly, because I think we want to focus on the Kraken.
The cool thing about Dragon Turtles, they are gargantuan, right? They're like your island-sized turtles. You can have them as big as you want. Gargantuan just means they are larger than 20 feet by 20 feet. They fit in bigger than a 4x4 cube.
Infinitely big when you get to gargantuan.
You can just pick how large it is. Challenge rating 17, really high-level threat. They make an appearance, I think, in the lightly in Tomb of Annihilation, Dragon Turtle. And they're really cool. They're basically just dragons. They just look like turtles, like giant turtles. They have a steam breath instead of a fire breath, and they have tail and bite attacks. They're turtles. They fight things. Really simple, really straightforward.
The thing where you can get really interesting, I think, with the Dragon Turtle is in its size and playing around with the scale of it. Them coming up underneath the ship and then just marooning the ship on their back, I think, is a great way to use a Dragon Turtle in a way that feels interesting. Tons of, you just look beneath the ship when you're in the deep, deep ocean, and then down below you can see what seems like the world moving beneath you. There's a lot of stuff you can do, just building scenes with Dragon Turtles, because I don't know if they're necessarily hostile automatically. They kind of have that almost neutral vibe.
They are neutral, and I really like to play into because they are dragons. Their creature type is dragon. I love playing into that nuance with Dragon Turtles. Play on their avarice, their greed, right? They will threaten your ship unless you give them treasure or something like that. Or someone has stolen treasure from them, and unless you return it, they will not, they'll take someone as collateral from your crew, right? And you have to, in order to get them back, you must go and recover the treasure. Having play on that very base thing, they're not super intelligent, and they're not super wise or charismatic. They're just big dragons that are shaped like turtles. So play on that, and I think that's a really cool way to use it.
I love the idea of the evil pirate crew having that. Give us someone as collateral. All right, take this cabin boy. We'll be back for you.
Yeah, we care about him very much. And because the Dragon Turtle's not very wise, just, yes, I will take your dumb boy. or whatever. Some questions in chat just before we jump onto the biggest boy, which is the Kraken. I see Wild Ricochet asking about how do you use electricity while traveling in water. I assume you're talking about lightning damage, Wild, and I don't. Personally, I have no special rules for them, for lightning damage. There are plenty of homebrew options out there. You could give creatures disadvantage, you can give it an AoE, you could do all sorts of stuff. I just play it rules as written. The only thing that I change in water is the fire damage rule, where if you're completely submerged in water, fire damage is halved.
Because that is
do you do that differently?
I do it roughly the same thing. Depending on the scale of the campaign, if I was doing a long-term water campaign, I would let it go. I would just, I would discuss the rules with the players and figure it out. On the other hand, like if it was a one-shot and a player was like, because I think the way it comes up is a player uses their lightning bolt. It's like, does anything crazy happen? Because it happens underwater, and I'd be like, yeah, it, and then just make something up for the rules of it.
Well, and I see what Wild actually asked that question for a reason. I once had a party fight a Kraken, and they just murked it with electricity. And I wasn't sure how to handle it. Well, Wild, in 5th edition, Krakens are actually all about lightning and electricity. They're actually immune to it. So that's not a problem. But even if it were, like, say they tried to do that with a Dragon Turtle, all you have to say is, there are rules for how lightning and electricity and all that stuff work underwater, and it's just no different than on land. So, there's the whole ocean the electricity disperses into, and it doesn't do any more extra damage to creatures underwater. It's really, I think that's just when you see players trying to abuse especially what Pete was just saying, making a snap decision because it was the rule of cool. When players try to abuse the rule of cool, that's where you need to take a minute and just say, hey guys, look, I made that call because it was fun. We're not doing that anymore because you guys are kind of taking advantage of it. And that's not the point of why we're doing this, right? It's supposed to be a challenge for you guys. But moving along, the Kraken.
The Kraken is one of my favorite monsters in all of 5th edition. And I think that the Kraken, more than... This is probably my number one monster where I feel like the Kraken is one of the least well-utilized monsters in all of the monster manual. Possibly the number one least utilized monster in the monster manual.
So one thing about Kraken, let's just talk... I'm going to put my lore pants on. The Krakens, in the Forgotten Realms at least, are these incredibly ancient creatures. They're from the creation of the world. They came into the world from the elemental plane of water when the primordials were sculpting all of existence. And that is kind of where they came from. And they've just been there ever since. They're insanely ancient wild creatures. And more importantly, they can take any number of different shapes or forms. And I like that. They're always gargantuan, absolutely beyond ludicrous huge. But you could have a very, very tentacly Kraken, or you can have any number of various other things, right? You could make something just look like a tentacly Tarask. You could take a Cthulhu. You could use Kraken as a kind of stat block for something like that.
Big enough
Maybe
octopus.
Not because there's so much baggage with Cthulhu, but
a big enough octopus or giant squid could just be a Kraken.
Yeah. Anything that is kind of got that rubbery, tentacly feel will generally work. But let's talk a little bit about what makes Kraken so special in terms of what they do, because that's what we're really talking about right now. I'm going to start with the easy ones and hand it off to you, Pete. They have a swim speed and they can breathe underwater.
Yeah, they have that. They have the freedom of movement feature, which means basically it can't be restrained and it can't have its speed reduced, which is, it's relevant, but it's not like anything all that exciting per se. Once we get into the Kraken's bigger moves, I think is where it starts to get interesting. For starters, its bite attack is terrifying. I mean, this is a challenge rating 23 monster. Its bite attack, what is the exact rule set on it? Because it's not precisely a swallow, is it? It's not like a swallow, like in the way that 5th edition usually does them.
The way
they kind of consume creatures.
Yeah, it's interesting. It has a swallow effect if it has a creature grappled. So if it grapples it with a tentacle, it can then bite it and swallow it. A normal bite doesn't, which wouldn't swallow by default. It's got some funny rules text to it, but it functions like any other gargantuan or large or huge size creatures that swallows, right? It eats the creature. If the Kraken takes enough damage, it spits the creature out if it fails a saving throw. And while the creature's inside the Kraken, the creature takes a bunch of acid damage every turn it's being digested. Which is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying.
Some standard swallow tactics there that you can do.
And Kraken, by the way, challenge rating 23.
Yep.
Important to note, super high level. Siege monster feature does double damage to ships. Oh, absolutely horrifying.
It also has legendary actions. For one thing, with its tentacles, one of the funniest things the Kraken can do is it can just pick people up and just throw them around with the tentacles. I think it can throw something that it's grappling up to 60 feet. So they can just toss you all the way across the other side of the ocean and like isolate people in this way. It also can cause lightning storms. It can shoot giant bolts of electricity out of its form. Striking individuals in kind of a small area, or is it individual?
Anyway, it's kind of like call lightning.
Yeah, it's got 3 lightning bolts, and it can target 3 different people with it. So it feels kind of like an AOE because you can hit 3 people with it. Very, very cool.
Yeah, and one of the things I really love about the Kraken, right, is that fling feature. No one uses. I mean, very rarely do players or dungeon masters use fling. But one of the huge limits to fighting underwater is a character's ability to move. Characters that don't have swim speeds or have their movement halved, and being chucked 60 feet on a character that can only move 30 feet normally, half of that underwater, that takes them 4 movements to get back. 2 whole turns of just moving just to get back in range of the Kraken. So, I mean, that can be a really potent ability, especially if you have a like barbarian in the party that doesn't swim super well. Or doesn't have a magical way to swim, basically.
But here's my number one favorite thing about the Kraken, and this is the reason why I think of it often as an underutilized monster. I think there's a strong association with Krakens just kind of wantonly destroying ships and his forces of destruction. But Krakens have a 22 intelligence.
Oh yeah,
which
hyper intelligent.
They're really, really smart. You can play them as tactically as they want. They have goals. They have rationality. They probably have minions that they're commanding because they're just that ancient and wise. Using the fling technique, it's not just going to like pick someone up and throw them arbitrarily. It's going to throw them into some kind of situation in which they know it's the best place to throw them. I imagine like a great Kraken fighting in its lair might just fling people into dangerous areas that it's set up inside the lair for that particular purpose. I think once you start viewing the Kraken in that light, it really changes how you think about their mechanics.
Absolutely. And I mean, the regional effects that Krakens have are just cool. For example, Krakens can alter the weather at will in a 6-mile radius centered upon its lair. It can just make an incredibly brutal storm. Just get used to it.
Very cool.
This effect is identical to Control Weather spell, which is an 8th level spell it can just do. And you can describe how it goes. Hell, it can control weather. That doesn't necessarily mean just a storm. It can just make it Arctic cold. Hell, the ocean freezes over on your ship. Have fun getting back to the surface.
Idea
you try and go down under the Kraken? Good luck.
An idea from V-Bunny here. Maybe a Kraken in your world doesn't have tentacles. Instead, it uses giant fish hooks to grab you and looks similar to a fish more so than an octopus. Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to flavor in your world, that sounds absolutely terrifying. And I would not want to encounter a giant fish hook monster that pulled me down.
And I love Freynor's comments, a giant shuckle. Yeah, I mean, hell, why not? You could have your Kraken look like a Slow King, or a shuckle, or a cloister, or kabutops, or whatever. You can have it look like whatever you want. Perhaps the fling is a telepathic fling against the giant kabutops thing beneath the water, or kabuto monster beneath the water, right? You can roll with this in a million different ways. You can reflavor it a million different ways. And it's an incredibly interesting monster.
All hail the Helix.
I would just recommend, if you are going to use a Kraken, try not to, how do I put it? Don't make it dumb. It has a 22 intelligence. It is an incredibly genius creature. It should be tactically intelligent. Yeah. If the players are fighting the Kraken, unless the players have really gone out of their way to track it down and be clever with it, it should be because the Kraken's letting them. Because the Kraken has invited them into its lair. And if that's the case, the Kraken probably has some allies waiting in the wing. So I love Kraken. I think they're super cool. Having the Kraken have cultists is really neat. That's a very common trope in the Forgotten Realms. But you can do it in any setting. Hell, you could give it a genie advisor in the form of a Merid, a monster we didn't really talk about too much. But I just love Krakens. They're really cool. They're very this cosmic. They're your Cthulhu.
Yeah, agreed. Also, just a side note before we jump off, they know 4 languages. They know Abyssal, Celestial, Infernal, and Primordial. They also have telepathy, but that's
ancient.
That's wild.
Ancient.
Now, Jeremy, do you have anything else that you want to say about underwater creatures? Use them and they're fun, is basically what I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty more creatures we didn't talk about. The Aboleth is a big one we didn't touch on. That it's kind of like a little mini or Kraken that's
kind
of a
baby Kraken.
Crazy and more telepathic and far realms. Far realms kind of relates to like Cthulhu.
The Aboleth is more Lovecraftian than the Kraken is.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a bunch of cool creatures. I recommend looking into them. They're all in the monster manual. I don't think anything we talked about today was actually from Bolo's guide or anything like that. I think everything we pulled from the monster manual. And yeah, you can do some crazy things with it. And they're really, really cool.
Well, with all that said, Jeremy, shall we move now to the segment Ask Pete and Jeremy?
I did have one last thing to add in. And that is, there are big friendly creatures. Adult bronze dragons or bigger bronze dragons are often found in coastal and underwater circumstances. The boys recently ran into one of those in Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Not an adult one, baby one. But you can always use a dragon, a bronze dragon, as a kind of helper if the players need it. If you put them up against something that ended up being way stronger than you expected, and you really, really didn't want that to be the dramatic fight where everyone died because it didn't feel right, you can always have a dragon come help them. It's always a good segue. Oftentimes, the players will think, oh, this fight was just the story hook that you made to tie in this new bronze dragon NPC. They won't realize that you screwed up and had to bring in a bronze dragon NPC so they didn't all die. So it can work out really cool. That's all. We're not going to go too deep into that guy. But yeah. Thank you for playing with us. Thank you for playing with us. Thank you for hanging out, everybody. Thank you for watching, for all this awesome comments in the chat. Fraynor, don't fuckle with Chuckle. I agree. I'm sorry with Chuckle. But yeah, thanks everyone for hanging out. Let's move on to our last segment, like Pete was saying. Ask
Pete and Jeremy. So our first question is from Gamer Lesbians. Any tips for people who are learning to play D&D? What a big question, and I love it.
Also, welcome to the server, Gamer Lesbians. It's great to have you.
There's so much there. For learning to play, I assume that means like going as a player rather than a DM, and I think the advice there is different. Learning to play, I think, for starters, the most important first thing to learn is to just not be embarrassed and to just know that you're all there in a space role playing and having fun together, and to let yourself enjoy it and to have fun and to kind of dive into the experience. I think that's the most important first thing you can do when you're starting to play D&D, is to just let yourself enjoy it unironically and to just play it and have fun.
Yeah, I would also recommend, if you're familiar with all of the different Twitch shows that are out now about Dungeons and Dragons, it's fine to watch those and to pull inspiration from them, but don't try to be. Matt Mercer is Matt Mercer because that's who he is. It's the players he plays for. It's the situation he's in. No one's going to be Matt Mercer except for Matt Mercer. And that goes for anyone else who streams D&D. Play your game. Don't try and play the game that other people are playing. Do whatever you need to do to have fun. If you're playing with your friends and you come to a point where, oh man, this rule seems dumb or isn't fun, or hell, I don't know what the rule is for that. You can make things up. You can move along as long as everyone at the table understands what's going on and is on the same page. I wouldn't let the rules of the game ever get in the way of having fun. And keep that in mind when you're playing. It's not about always having the most dramatic experience, the most exquisite, incredible storytelling crafted by an Adonis of language. Is that a word? I don't know. But
yeah, not like the games that we run here on Pete and Jeremy's D&D time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all I'd say. Don't worry too much about the rules. Just know enough to play and have fun. More importantly than anything else.
Yep. Amen.
Matty Morgs asks our next question for the evening. Have you run for or played for any memorable Rangers? And if so, what made them memorable? I've got a 2 on this one.
I have not really played with a ton of Rangers. My pick is Captain Hood.
You see, I was also going to say the Hood. So,
well, if you have 2, let me take Hood.
You take Hood. Take Hood. There's one moment I have for Hood.
Was it his final moment?
It's the final moment.
All right, I'll touch on it. Captain Hood was a ranger that a friend of ours made, who was very almost Batman-y. He wore a hood. He was defined by the fact that he wore a hood, and he just liked to kill things and was just hunting game. And there was always this underlying context of him where it never felt like it was like he enjoyed the hunt. It just felt like this is what he's good at, and he feels like it's his responsibility to rid the world of foul creatures. Very stoic. But there was always something about the character, even though there wasn't a lot of I would say there's no nuance to the character. There was something so straight ahead about it that it felt like iconic in my mind. And I could still picture like Simple Ranger in a green hood, Captain Hood, that would go around slaying monsters. And in his final ever moment, which ties in a little bit to our underwater theme today, the last time I saw Captain Hood, um, we were battling an aboleth underwater, and the aboleth escaped to the elemental plane of water, or was perhaps banished there. I can't remember the exact situation, but Captain Hood went up to like the portal that led into the underwater plane of the plane of elemental water, and dived in after the aboleth. And his character's like ending resolution was he's just off killing all the aboleths in the elemental plane of water for eternity. Was kind of his ending.
Yeah, it was a pretty great ending for that, because the character was just, everyone was like, what are you doing? We can't go after it. And he's like, I'm going in. And that was the end of Hood.
Yep.
But it was awesome. And the aboleth was banished, then resummoned, stab circled, and then left through the portal. So it was already maimed.
Also,
he had a shot.
I'm going to throw out right now, we have a ton of questions here. So the question by Wild Ricochet, most interesting moment that starts with that, will be the last question.
For today. We'll get to everything else the next time for certain.
Indeed.
So, Crowley asks, Killer Whale Talk got me thinking about the documentary Blackfish. Either of you see it? If not, I'd recommend it. I haven't.
Not.
But
no, I don't know anything about it.
I didn't describe my other ranger. My other ranger was Keeley, a character actually played by Crowley.
Cool.
And I think the thing that I really loved about Keeley was by far the central level-headed like voice of reason in that psychotic party. There were just some very extreme personalities there. And yeah, I liked Keeley. She had a couple of core things that made her special. She chewed on her mint. She loved her chocolate. Yeah, it was nice. But no, I've not seen Blackfish. Yeah, never mint chocolate for some reason.
Crowley also asked, what horrifying real-world sea creature are you most terrified of?
Oh, God.
For me, it would be the box jellyfish.
Okay.
It's deadly poisonous. It stings you once and you die.
Damn, I hadn't thought about that.
Very scary to me. I wasn't saying that ironically.
Yeah, probably sharks. I was always terrified of sharks. I've been scared of them for a long time.
Fair enough.
But some very visceral dreams of being annihilated by sharks.
Jesus. Shiva asks, have either of you ever gone scuba diving or something similar? I have not.
I'd love to. I never have. I'd love to.
Would be cool.
I would love to swim with sharks, because similarly to like most of the things I'm terrified of, like I'm terrified of spiders. They're so cool.
Yep, it's true.
But I hate them, but they're so cool. I'd love to swim with. I've swum in like an aquarium setting at like a resort, but not out in the water. Anyway, next question. Would you dive with sharks? Oh, yes, I have.
What's your favorite whale? Can I pick a whale shark? Is that a whale or a shark?
It's a whale shark, but a basking shark is a whale. I have no idea if that's true.
If I can't pick the whale shark, I'll pick the sperm whale, but I like whale sharks.
Mine is a sperm. Okay, so the basking shark is in fact a shark. The whale shark is indeed a shark. They're both sharks. So
great.
I'm going to go shark it is. What's your favorite sea creature that isn't a whale?
Can I pick an otter?
Probably a basking shark.
Does an otter count?
I guess.
I guess that's not a sea. That's a river thing. Turtles. I like big giant sea turtles. Not like the giant ones, but like tortoises and those kind of things. I like those guys.
Mine's a basking shark. I love basking sharks.
Pretty fair.
Dolphins or whales? Whales. Dolphins are horrifying. 100%. Absolutely terrifying. They're a nightmare.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? The answer is all the wood he could chuck. From Wild Ricochet there.
If you could ride any Pokemon that's using Surf, what would it be?
Can I teach my Snorlax Surf? Because if not, the iconic Lapras.
Yeah, 100%.
But if I could just roll around on a sleeping Snorlax, that sounds very pleasant and a lifestyle I'd be about.
What's the worst adaptation of a book to film that you have watched? God, I don't watch a lot of them. Is the problem? I
there's
miss a lot of
one-
movies.
Oh, I wanted to say Last Airbender, but that's the TV show. There's definitely one that I'm not pulling up that I hate.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't watch a lot of movies. Oftentimes, if I see a movie, it's because I know it's good. That's why I've gone to see it. So I unfortunately, don't know. Are you excited to go to hell? Hell yeah!
Oh, dude, so excited.
Have you accepted this fate? Yes, Bionic Sheep, I have accepted my fate.
I'm not yet. I'm still working on it, and we'll get there someday. If I keep really believing in myself and I keep focusing, I think I can someday find acceptance. Wild Ricochet asks, "What's the darkest twist you've ever thrown into a game?"
Oh, I hucked the carcass of their beloved donkey at them at the end. Why? Sorry, the big bad hucked the carcass of their beloved donkey at them.
I have one that hasn't paid off
Thanks
yet.
for asking, Wild.
You know, it's too dark. I'm not even going to put it in this conversation. Ask me out of stream.
Oh, jeez. Okay, it's going to be bad.
What's your favorite myth?
That's a good question.
Someone was talking about Odysseus before. Wait, what?
Dude, I love myths. I love mythology. Fucking scary, spooky things scare the shit out of me. They wig me out. Spooky shit bad. I don't know.
Jason
Something not spooky
is pretty good. I mean, the Odyssey is really good, which is basically a myth. The story of Odysseus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'll say those two arbitrarily. If I was back there, I wasn't really into myths for a long time. But if I went back to it, then I'd maybe know better.
Wild Ricochet asks, "Do you guys watch anime?" I don't. And he also follow up, and if so, which is your favorite? I don't watch anime. So.
I'm an anime boy, and to answer the question, I have 3 categories that I'm going to say that I'm going to pick my favorite in. My favorite anime movie is undoubtedly Spirited Away. My favorite anime show that's like complete is going to be Samurai Champloo. But I also really love One Piece, but that show's forever and it will never be done, so I don't know if I can call it my favorite.
Actually, I've recently watched Howl's Moving Castle. Does that count?
Yes, it does. It's also very
all
good.
right. I loved that. So that's it. That's the
really
answer.
Excellent.
That's my answer to
that. What's your favorite question that's been asked here across all streams so far?
It's that one.
Yep.
Farfel asks, "Would you rather fight one giant octopus-sized seahorse? Oh god, one giant octopus-sized seahorse or 100 seahorse-sized giant octopi? 100 baby tiny octopuses or one really large seahorse?" I don't want to fight either of them. I love them.
I want to fight the big seahorse if I had to pick. If you have to pick.
Well, here's the thing: the octopuses, right, are squishy, and I feel like it'd be hard for me to harm them.
It also just feels really unpleasant.
Yeah,
that just sounds like it would be. I'd rather have the larger thing. Oh yeah, you missed a Wild Ricochet's question. What's your favorite rogue? And my answer is I like the thief rogue.
I'm not a fan of a lot of the rogues. I like the assassin actually. I want to make the assassin work. That's the one that intrigues me the most.
Farku asks, "What is your favorite class combination build?" Combination.
Ooh, okay. Combination makes it really rough.
Yeah, I assume like you don't mean vanilla, specifically non-vanilla is what we're going for.
That's what he means. Tough. What do I like? I mean, I am a big fan of the Sorlock if I'm gonna play it. I like those 2 levels in Warlock for Eldritch Blast and Agonizing Blast, and then a bajillion levels in Sorcerer for just quick casting a bunch. I really dig that. It's a lot of fun.
I don't know if it's I wouldn't say it's necessarily super powerful, but I do enjoy Monkberry and Fighter for the best punches that you can do and just punch people a lot.
I see yours is actually good.
It's pretty good.
Okay.
It's not as good as it I think it sounds. It sounds better than it is.
No, I mean, sorry, yours is flavorful.
Yeah, see, I like the flavor of it.
Mine is powerful.
I thought you were saying mine was strong. I was like, it's
No,
it's
I didn't
okay.
mean it like that. No.
It's okay. It's not terrible.
That's not what I meant. Wild Ricochet asks, most interesting moment of divine intervention in a game, and when you think it's appropriate? Oh, divine intervention. That's such a weird one. I don't know.
I'm
not the biggest fan of it, to be honest.
I've used the feature in ways. I like the way that I use divine intervention as a player. I wish more players would use it the way I do it, which is I ask gods for out of combat things. Like, I really don't like when a player does like the vague kind of aid us now in our moment, because that kind of puts the DM on the spot where like, well, I can't just have the god come down and wipe everything out just because you rolled a 10. So you have to like decide what it's going to be. I use divine intervention as a player in situations where, like, I remember one time I used it because we beat a fight really easily, and I looked up at my god and I was like, give me more of a challenge, and then you just put down another couple monsters to fight. I think that was the same game with the hood, actually. That was that might have been Bumjik. But also, like, things like, for example,
so injured.
Things like, oh, we can't get to this underwater city. My god, bless us with the strength to traverse these oceans. Like, your god gives you water breathing. Done. Like, that kind of stuff, I think, is a good way to do divine intervention.
The reason I don't like it, and like I agree with Pete here 100%. The thing I don't like about it is that 90% of the time your god just says lol, nope, or just doesn't listen. I like that as like a dramatic, like, I can beget this favor from my deity, but I can only do it so often. I'd prefer it be those minor things that are just outside of your realm of ability, like you were just saying, right? Bless us with the gift of breath or something.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot. I like that more as a thing you could get.
I do as well,
personally. Or even asking for, like, rather than aid in the middle of combat, being able to do it prior to the combat, because it also sucks using an action to have a 90% chance that you're going to do literally nothing, and then a 10% chance that, all right, now the DM has to pause the combat and figure out what creature the god sends, if anything, or what spell happens. And I don't like it in combat personally. I'm much with Pete's situation there.
And we said we were going to stop on this one, but there's only two more serious questions here, so I think we can just bang them out. We got V Bunny with, have you guys yet covered races and underwater world / seafaring adventures? We've been kind of doing that a little bit offhandedly as we've been moving through, talking about the manners in which one traverses and the races that are available to you for underwater campaigns. Was it last week that we did that the most, or the week before?
Yeah, in one of the previous ones. The issue with talking about underwater races is races doesn't matter so much. Like, statistically, they're pretty comparable between them. The big thing is the cultures of them. And
yeah, then that might be an interesting thing.
That's world to world. Like, anyone might run that totally differently, from the Forgotten Realms to their own homebrew world to, and each player will run it differently in the Forgotten Realms or in different worlds, each dungeon master. So it's kind of hard to.
But the answer is a little bit, but very lightly we have talked about that. So go back and check us out. We got the VODs are up on Twitch. I know that. You can look at some of those.
Yeah, and if there's interest, maybe we'll go back and cover it a little more.
Indeed. And then Crowley said some stuff, and while Ricochet was saying, when I asked the rogue thing, I meant more the rogue character. Again, not to toot my own horn, I really love Daggerty Doublebottom as a rogue that I play a lot. He's my boy. He's my roguey boy. I also love a character that our friend played, the Magpie, who was an Era Cochrane pirate, who was a very cool character. Kind of a Dread Pirate Roberts thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of pretty cool rogues that I played with throughout the time. Magpie was great. I had a character named Edmund in one of my campaigns, which was just all about that fortune and misfortune stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Rogues are cool.
Yeah, I agree.
They're not my style of play, but I like what they can do. And
I think that's going to do it for us, Jeremy.
Yeah. Holy moly, 7:55 already.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that's the end for DnDTime Talks today. Pete and I are going to be taking off, but we'll catch you on Friday for Pete and Jeremy's D&D time, and then Sunday for Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
Dragon Heist.
Now, I'm really excited about Dragon Heist. Actually, it should be really, really good this week. Things are really starting to come together. I feel like you're gonna figure stuff out more really soon. I'm hoping.
Fair enough. We shall see. I know there was some good drama at the end where one of our players has been contracted to kill all the rest of us. So
yeah, I'm really interested to see how that turns out.
So
maybe
that'll be
everything will
interesting to see.
Turn on its head when
so
Kyle
it's either
tries to
going to be a very entertaining episode or the last episode. And you already say Pete and Jeremy's. Tune in to Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time. It's on Fridays. I'm Pete. Oh wait, actually, no, one more thing. It's very important. Thank you all so much for hanging out. We love you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've got a couple thank yous as well, specifically for Freynour for subscribing 15 months in a row.
Thank you so much.
That's a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Freynour.
And that'll do. If you're interested in more D&D right now, you can check out Matty Morgs. He's live on his Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Matty Morgs. We'll host him here, or you can just hop over right now. So thank you all. We love you.
I'm Pete.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this is D&D Time Talks. Good night, everybody.